It's me, Pops Fan Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. So come get some. CromCon.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 7th and 8th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish. They're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kelber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday night as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Silverline Silver Sunday on this Sunday, January 21st. I am your host. I am Roland Mann. I'm joined by my usual cohorts, including Mr. Tom Mason, Chris All's former co-worker. Say hi, Tom.
So ridiculous.
Hi, everyone.
We are also joined by Miss Roberta Conroy, who is also former Malibu Chris Alm former coworker.
Yes. Hello, everyone. And
Hi,
hi, Chris. Hi, Tom.
And of course, we have that man in the mask himself, Mr. Mike W. Belcher. Say hi, Mike.
Hey, everybody. I'm the official fifth wheel nut. Yay!
Oh, that's fine.
Where were you?
Mike's like, not another group of Malibu folks.
I'll just be over here listening.
Where are the old valiant people?
Right. And tonight we are stoked and jacked to have join us. He sent me a really long bio. I'm going to abbreviate it. He's a 30-year veteran in both publishing and video game industry. Most recently, Chris has been the creative director, or is the creative director for Velen Studios, doing this multiplayer Dodge Brawl game Knockout City, and its super innovative mixed reality experience, Hot Wheels Rift Rally. But the reason you all are here and tuning in is because you want to know. Chris was the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Malibu Comics Entertainment, the publisher of Men in Black and Ultraverse Comics. While at Malibu, Chris served as editor-in-chief, overseeing the development of a wide variety of both original and licensed properties, including the Ultraverse line of superhero comics, and of course, Rune. Welcome, Chris. Say hi.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Chris? I
It's great to be
haven't
here.
talked to you in like 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
I'm glad to see one of my coworkers is here.
That's
Former coworkers.
two of your former coworkers.
Two.
That's right.
That's right.
I do.
Well,
too,
3.
man.
I'm me too.
Three, right? Yeah, well,
Well, Tom was the one that labeled himself that way. That's why I was
That's
like
true.
zeroing in on Tom.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Although you were my boss, so
You don't
Yeah.
have to get so sad about it, Roland. I mean, it was pretty fun, I think.
it was fun. Oh, listen,
Mhm.
we talk about this all the time here, as Tom can attest, how much fun we had at Malibu.
yeah.
But
Once you
tonight,
Mhm.
Chris, we're gonna learn a little bit about you, your secret origin, and then maybe some talk about a bunch of stuff from Malibu that you can remember, and of course, Tom will remind you.
Yeah.
So so
He'll prod me.
so I'm always going to start the question. So the first question I'm going to ask Chris is, tell us how you got into comics. What are your first memories of comics as a fan? What did you read? That kind of thing. Oh, looks like my internet's having issues.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So I was in a very hot VW Beetle when I was a kid. I was sitting on the floor of the VW Beetle heading to Oklahoma. And we stopped in a weird store with a giant or a weird stop with a huge sombrero hat. And inside was a comic book rack. And I got Avengers number 101. That was the one that kind of got me started. So I fell in love with comics, especially the Avengers. I loved Captain America, Iron Man, were two of my favorites. And in fact, I love Captain America because I could throw a green trash can lid at my brother, which we did oftentimes because he resembled the Red Skull, at least in my mind at the time. So my comics interest started off in a cruel fashion with my poor little brother.
It could have been Thor's hammer, so you could have
Yeah,
just been.
well, lucky for him, it wasn't Thor that I fell in love with at first. And then I as you do, you read comics in middle school, and I really liked them. And then you start hiding them in high school. And I found a girlfriend, and then I didn't read them at all. Then I got into college and discovered Alan Moore, and because I was at Northridge University, which is right across the street. It's a great store called Golden Apple, if you remember Golden Apple at the time.
Absolutely.
Yep. And I started going, and that's when Dark Knight came out and Watchmen came out, and Watchmen just blew me away. So that completely reignited my interest in comics. And I was augmenting my pathetic college income by painting miniatures. I thought that was a really good growth opportunity, was to paint miniatures.
You got money for that?
I had a former roommate who did that.
That's a good question. Did I get money for that? Well, I was a good negotiator, so I negotiated an actual rate instead of getting store credit. So I had that going for me. So I think I got like $6 per, and they would turn around and sell them for like $20 or something like that.
So you're like a painting prostitute.
Well, see, that's awesome.
So you
totally
didn't get them in trade though, huh?
No, I was making at least 15 cents an hour because it took me a long time to but
Now,
sorry,
did you use like a toothpick and stuff like that to paint the miniatures?
I did all that stuff. And also I had to repaint them over and over because I wasn't very good at first. So I had to get really, and then you paint armies for people and they pay more for the armies and all.
I was going to ask you now, is this like the Napoleonic era stuff, like the French armies and British armies and
the bread and butter of Last Grenadier, which is the place I went to, was Napoleonic armies, and then also D&D figures. Those are the ones. Yeah. So mostly I was painting D&D figures and getting kind of ripped off. But I met a guy named Paul O'Connor, and I became an employee of the store, which was trying to do a distributorship. So distributorships are like multiple. You're trying to sell to multiple stores. And the guy who hired me didn't want to do any work. He was the founder of the distributorship. He wanted to play Stratomatic baseball all day. So he hired me.
Baseball. My God.
Yeah. Stratomatic baseball. So while he was playing Stratomatic baseball, he wanted me to run the distributorship, call all the clients, and because it was like my first entrepreneurial opportunity, I grabbed hold of that and seized it. Right, and that's what I did. And then from there, I met Dave Albridge because I left that place to become the game guy for Scott Rosenberg's company, Sunrise. And through Dave, I met Tom. And
so I didn't realize that you actually worked for Scott at Sunrise.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
That's how I met him.
And in fact, it's not secret.
But now I thought you, Tom, I thought you knew Dave from
Fantagraphics.
Fantagraphics, yeah.
Which I did, yeah.
Okay.
Dave was the centerpiece.
Yeah, so Dave was at Sunrise. Dave and I met at Fantagraphics. Dave went to Sunrise Distribution. Then Dave convinced Scott to back his idea for Malibu Comics, and then Dave brought me in, and then we had a pitch meeting with Paul O'Connor. And my memory is that Chris basically told Dave, "Look, if you're doing a comic book company, I'm gonna be in." Is that
you got this a little wrong, Tom? By the way, I hesitate to say that because Tom has an eidetic. Is that how you say it? Eidetic?
Yeah, really good memory.
He has a really good memory. That's right. Thank you. Yeah. Tom has a really good memory, and I have a really bad memory. Second only to Dave Albridge in terms of just.
But you're really good at remembering your emotional hurts.
Yes. Every slight that Tom ever did to me, I remember that excruciatingly well.
That's what's listed on the board over there, isn't it?
That's right.
What actually happened is that there were parallel things going on, Tom. So Dave and I were working together at Sunrise, trying to fix Sunrise. Scott had multiple comic book companies while he was
already.
Yes.
Oh yeah, already.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he already had those, and then I became the fixer for those. I was trying to get those back on their feet while Tom and Dave were off starting Malibu in the very beginning. Okay. And then what happened was later we combined them.
Okay.
We combined all the imprints because it wasn't working. There was 3 different offices and multiple lines of comics.
Hold that thought. We're going to run through some of these comments here. Dave Rios, who is another former Malibu employee, says, "Hey all." Madness Network says, "Hey yo, what's up, pops?" Mr. Gutierrez says, Rob Davis says, "Another former Chris employee."
Hey, Rob.
David Ace, I'm going to hold on to your comment for just a little. Your next comment for just a little bit. Yeah, it's a question. It's a good. Yeah. Geek View Tavern says, "Can I ask Chris questions?" You absolutely may.
I think Geek View Tavern might be Dave.
I think it might be Dave as well. we're gonna get Dave on here sometime too and roast him as well. That's not what we're doing.
Wait a minute.
Wait, that's not what we're doing.
You told me this was going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. We are going to have a blast. So let's backtrack just a little bit. So you said that there were already Scott already had some comic companies. What were those? Can you remember those?
Yeah, it was Tom, help me.
Okay, so we had 4 imprints, right? We didn't. Scott did.
Scott did.
Okay.
Scott had an imprint in Brooklyn, New York called Eternity Comics.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
And then because of the way the comics industry was sort of not working at the time, it was financially beneficial to have a new number 1 come out from a new comic book company than it was to have a new number 1 from an existing comic book company.
Right.
So the Brooklyn office created a second company called Imperial Comics.
Right. And there was Amazing.
And there was in West Virginia, there was Amazing Comics.
Right.
And then because of the same principle of new comic book companies sell better, there was also Wonder Comics.
Wonder Color Comics.
What? I have Wonder Color Comics.
Yeah, so there was Amazing and Wonder were in West Virginia, and Brooklyn and Imperial were out of the same office.
Was it Power Factor?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so Brooklyn had Imperial and Eternity.
Okay, and all those were Scott's.
All those were Scott's. So Scott had this idea. Scott had this idea where he was going to be like a mini empire of vertical integration, which was the buzzword at the time.
Yeah.
Where he was going to have a distributorship. He was going to have these publishing companies. And then he would use his mail order company to sell the back issues from those companies and try to turn them into hot comics, which would then increase the value of his distributorship. And so it's a great plan, and it should work perfectly if everything works perfectly.
Right. Now, if I recall, and this, we're a little premature with this question, but didn't Malibu continue to do a little bit of that kind of idea even throughout when I was there as well? Yes, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Because here's the thing: if you can pull it off, it works.
Right.
Yeah, I think the idea was to try to have an imprint that would say something different from other imprints in terms of what what the product was.
Yeah.
And so we continue to do that, but what would invariably happen is one imprint would just be selling a lot better than the other, and so it'd be like, well, we should probably put new books on the imprint that's actually selling.
Right.
So I don't think we hit I think we were subscale to make that work because the numbers were too small. Ultimately.
Right, and we didn't actually start the other imprints; we inherited them.
Yeah. Right.
So they sort of came to us hat in hand, and we were like, okay, let's do more work.
Well, and I seem to recall, Tom, that was your explanation to me when we submitted Cat and Mouse to you originally. We knew about because at the time it was Adventure, Eternity, and
Aircell.
Show, thank you, and so we knew about them all, but from our perspective, we're like, hey, we want to be with Eternity because that's where we thought we. But you're like, yeah, no, we want to put you with Aircell. We're like, and of course, my response to you was like, yeah, but we're not like the Aircell books. And you said, yeah, but they sell better. And I'm like, okay, we'll be with Aircell.
When I say better, it was not like a difference of 200 copies. It was like a difference of 20%.
Right? Yeah.
So it was like we actually had one of the things that Dave Oberts did was he charted everything. So he had all these bar graphs and pie charts and everything, and you could just look at the numbers, and it was like Aircell sells like 20%. It makes it's foolish to lose 20% of the small amount of income.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't argue with you when you said that. I'm like, okay, well, if that's what it is.
Yeah, if you want,
all right.
A royalty statement.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I still have mine, believe it or not. Mr. Gutierrez asked, what was Mr. Ohm's college major? So, Chris, what did you major in school?
I majored in history.
In history.
That's when I got my degree. Yeah.
So you could open up a history store.
My plan was to open up a history empire.
That's right.
Now, were you gonna be a teacher?
No, I never intended to be a teacher. My parents desperately wanted me to be a lawyer, especially my mother, because I argued with her so successfully. She thought that would be a good career path for me.
You should be a lawyer.
Yeah. So they were very disappointed. My dad wanted me to be anything but an artist because he was an artist. He was a artist and designer, and my stepdad was an engineer. So both of them were like, well, why don't you be an engineer? Why don't you be, don't be an artist.
Stay out of this creative crap.
Yeah, stay out of this creative crap. So when I told them I was going to become a comic book executive, that's what I really wanted to do. I didn't get a lot of support. There was not a lot of singing hosannas. And all the way to the end, they're like, hey, we're going to sell to Marvel. Who's Marvel?
Right.
It's like our biggest success is like, what? Just bounced off.
Mike Giles is tuning in. He's in the house. He says, hey, Chris. He says, I'm so sorry you still live in a garage.
Hey, you and me both, Mike.
Well, with California real estate prices, the garage is all you can afford.
That's right. And it just goes to show you how well comics pays, right?
That's exactly right. This is what I've earned over my whole career. The office I finally got.
I got an office with 3 bicycles and a whiteboard.
Right.
I got a view of a bicycle.
Geek View Tavern says some will have more fun than others. This is absolutely true. Then he says there were definitely reports of Sunrise selling second printing hot comics as first printing. I hadn't heard of that. And he says except for Platinum.
Except for Platinum was an imprint that we created out of. It wasn't what we inherited.
Yeah. Now, and that one was the one that did the Sarajevo dude, right?
Yes, that Buzz and Bell, and
also Sergio Ago.
That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so we're back up then. So they pulled. You heard they were going to start the comic book thing. You said, "Hey, I'm in," and
it's my dream.
Okay, and so what happened from those the Wonder Color, the Eternity. What happened after that? After you got in there?
Eventually, what happened is that those imprints got closed down. We weren't able to make publishing timing. A bunch of other things happened, and also the industry went through a bust.
Yeah,
went through a pretty major bust right after Malibu was started, and so we had to get we had to get really, really efficient at how do you create and publish comics.
Mm-hmm.
Which I should say is something that we had never done before.
Yeah, no sad. So it was interesting because we were always flying by the seat of our pants and we didn't know what we were doing, and there was not really a great example out there that was like, oh, let's just emulate that'll work.
Right. Well, so now what about so folks like me, and I know Mike's a fan of a lot of the 80s indie comics as well, because he's a fan of Mage. What about some of the companies like First and like Kamiko, those companies that had long running success?
In terms of the industry in general, so they had long running. They were also suffering from the bust, right? Everybody was suffering from the bust, and it was difficult to do color comics profitably after that time. So everything kind of got mixed up, and then everyone was figuring out their different approaches to being able to build a company that had some sustainability and could actually hire employees and keep them and all the rest.
Yeah. Now, what was the location when you first started? What was the address?
It was Lawrence Drive, right? Wasn't that right, Tom?
Okay. No, it's Lavery Court.
Lavery Court, that's right. Lawrence Drive came next.
We were in that unheated, unair conditioned light industrial space. It was like 900 square feet.
But luckily, from my miniature painting days, I had fingerless gloves, so that worked out really good. That was must-have equipment.
See, I think the first address I remember ever communicating with you guys was Lawrence Drive.
Right, and that was when we had expanded to 3 light industrial spaces. So we were awesome. Like at 2,700 square feet at that point, and it was the way it worked is there wasn't a uniform space. It was like 3 separate units that had been converted, so it was more like a rat maze.
Yeah,
than it was like a giant open spape.
And they had the big open roll top doors.
Right,
like a garage.
That's funny. We put Scott's desk by the roll top door.
I forgot about that.
Wow. Because we didn't want him in the bullpen.
Yeah,
with us because and I think we told him this flat out. It's like the stuff that you talk about is boring.
Right. He's the business guy.
I don't think it was because it was boring. There was also an aspect where Scott had to talk to people on the phone, and we were making a lot of dirty jokes and stuff like that constantly.
Yeah, but he doesn't.
I mean,
really?
It went a little bit the other way too. I think Scott was pretty happy with that idea.
Geek View Tavern says I still have my fingerless gloves. So David Gutierrez has another question here. He said, how did Chris and company make that transition to editorially controlling things?
Good question.
That started off
was
with
Protectors the first
Malibu.
one?
Well, it depends because what's the phrase editorial controlling?
That's
things?
what I'm trying to understand.
Because we always editorially controlled things.
Right.
We just didn't own things.
Right. Well, and that's a question here that I'm going to go ahead and pop this one up there. Mike Giles says, did Malibu have ownership of those early titles on Aircell and Eternity, or what? And then another question, what imprint was bringing in the highest revenue streams in the beginning?
I think Eternity was in the beginning, but I could be wrong on that. And then, we didn't own, we were very much about creators' rights and going out to creators. So like, for example, when Paul O'Connor, his first book was Bones, we had a whole employee creator agreement that basically gave them ownership of it, and that Malibu would take certain rights as part of that contract. But it was all about the creator's ownership. We didn't start doing original IP ownership until a little bit later.
Yeah. So if you Roland, you control Cotton Mountains, and so So we would have the right to publish stuff.
Right.
Then when we decided not to publish stuff anymore, we would give you the rights back. But
Yeah.
we never had media rights. We never had movie rights. We never had TV rights. We never had toy rights. We never had any. All we were interested in was the monthly comic book because that was revenue that you could count on.
Yeah.
Comic book and the reprints, like
And
graphic novels. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because at that time, there's no movie money.
Right.
So
Yeah,
there's
this is
nothing.
free all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm asking lots of questions. Roberta, Mike, you got any questions? I know Tom does, but you got any questions?
Yeah, I've got one.
All right, Mike, what you got?
As you were saying, talk about the '80s indie scene. Where you guys came in on, toward the late '80s. After you had First, Eclipse, and all those, and then Dark Horse, and then you guys. Where did you see you guys in the market? What was kind of the thing that you wanted to make Malibu and of course the imprints stick out more, as far as all those other things? Or was it, as Tom said, fly by the seat of your pants?
I think both answers. There's two answers to that. One was, I think initially the idea was to do things that weren't what everybody else was doing, to do things that like, fantasy and different kinds of genres that we hit up in. So we did Libby Ellis and we did Bones and we did give me a couple other ones, Tom, from that era.
We did Dark Wolf and we did
Dark Wolf.
Yeah.
And we did
So it wasn't
Horse and we did so we did Spies, Demons, Motorcycle Chicks. It's
I remember Libby Ellis.
It was trying to not go where everybody else was going.
Right.
And then the other thing
Trouble with Girls, the Rovers.
Trouble with Girls, exactly. And the other thing is that no plan or idea survives contact with the enemy, right? So as soon as we actually got out there and we're seeing what our sales really were and how retailers were reacting and racking our stuff, then it became more like, okay, we have to rethink, like what. We're gonna ride this rocket ship straight into the ground unless we rethink about like editorially. So then it became more of not our favorite sandwiches, like what we really wanted to do necessarily. It was more like, what did we think had a chance in the marketplace? What was good quality?
Yeah.
And what could we do on a regular basis, because it was so critical to hit your monthly actually being in the stores. Right. And that was really difficult, especially when you're dealing with. We were really great at breaking in new talent, and we always paid our talent, but we didn't pay them a lot, and so we got a lot of people that were new to the industry. Yeah. So making sure that they could actually deliver, and that we could hit those marks was really critical, I think.
Because one of the things that you find out is that when you go in and say, oh, I'm only going to publish comics that are fantastic and that are great and that are wonderful, that change the market. And these comics come from my heart, and I really want to tell these stories about my dying grandmother and my.
That was a good one, Tom. By the way,
I was like, if you want to stay in business, and we always looked at it as a business that you want to stay in it, so you're going to publish what the market brings, or you're not going to have a company anymore.
Yeah. Now that being said, there was a wide envelope of what we would try. I mean, I think we had maybe the widest range of potential genres than I think almost any other independent company. We would publish a wide range of stuff. So, and go ahead.
No, I just say one of the things when you say that, one of the things that when I get asked, because a lot of folks are always interested, the Malibu to Marvel transition kind of thing, and I said, one of the ways that I can explain it to you, the differences were small, but they were noticeable because they were corporate. And I said, here is an example. If a creative team came to me and said, hey, we got this great comic, we want you to do it, I could take it to you guys. And of course, we had the form we had to fill out, the bean counters would look at it and everything. And your question was always, will this comic make money? All right. So when you introduce Marvel into the picture, the same process. The question became, how much money will this comic make?
Yes.
And it doesn't sound like a big difference, but to me, it was a huge difference. It's not because before it was kind of like, well, can we make money on this? Okay, cool. If we can make money, let's do it.
Yeah,
That was kind of my take.
I think that's true. We would take a lot more chances. I mean, the bigger a company gets, the less chances they're willing to take. The more burden they place on an individual project to be profitable. Whereas we're doing like 30 projects a month, kind of at peak. Yeah.
Wow.
And but part of that was we were able to gang print all those. So we were able to reduce the overall costs. So adding a new new comic wasn't so bad, right? And we could take more chances that way. So that was the way we thought about stuff. And we didn't have any, like if we had 4 or 5 hits that were just generating tons and tons of cash, we may have had a different, philosophy.
Right.
But we were always looking for like what could potentially break through, like what could be a good, be a really successful comic.
Yeah.
And one thing we've talked about ever since is we were really looking at the retailers as the customer to a certain extent, right? The individual comic fans, they had to get through the retailers first, and we had to get through the retailers first to reach them. So if a retailer didn't support us by at least, having 10 number ones and 7 number 2s or whatever, we were dead. If they had 2 number 1s, 1 number 2, and 0 of the rest of them, that series was killed. And that happened often, really often, especially during the busts.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Roberta.
Well, I was going to ask about what do you think came close to really being successful enough to really have some promise?
The Ultraverse did. Ultraverse individual comics and characters were very successful when they were launched. I think an interlocking universe still has a lot of power in the business, and also we were giving the stores what they found easiest to sell with the people that were coming into their stores. If that makes sense.
Because the store is as busy as anybody else, and they don't have time to don't give a store something that's a really hard sell.
Right.
That's in a really weird format that they've never heard of before.
Yeah.
You wanted to try to make things as easy as possible for them.
I had some friends who will remain nameless on the stream because I still like them. They're still good guys, but they were determined to print their comic not like this, but like this. And I kept telling them, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Don't do that. And I even told them, I said, where's their retailer going to put it? They have no place for that format. They're like, yeah, but we like I'm like, I get it. I hear you. I understand. And this is before I moved out to California. And I kept telling them, I'm like, no, you don't want to do that. I'm like, yeah, it's a cool idea and everything. Yeah, but no, the retailer, they're going to put your book in the rack sideways. And I said, if the spine's down, it's going to flop over. I said, no, you don't want to do that. And they did it anyway. And a couple of years later, they're like, well, you were right. We shouldn't have done
that. How did that work out for him?
Yeah, not well.
Dave had this thing because Dave was really more of a touchy-feely retailer guy than Chris and I were. And
for sure.
Dave and I used to go to Golden Apple a lot on Melrose in LA. And we would just see like the top third of the cover is really all anybody sees.
Right.
So one of the things that we learned was, well, the logo has to be visible at that top third.
Not just visible, but legible.
Right. Yeah. You can't.
Yeah.
Because we would look at some logos and go, I don't even know what that says. And the closer we got to it, we still wouldn't know what it said. And so
that's right.
That top third has to have a readable logo from a distance of like 6 feet. And it's got to be comic book size because everybody has a comic book rack. Anything that's a different size gets stacked away from the other comics.
It's in the corner.
It's in the corner somewhere. It's basically off by itself. So you've got to fit the format. So we were big believers in the readable logo and the comic book size.
Yeah.
And the cover.
And the cover
being so critical, right? To someone looking at it and going, oh, is that interesting or not? Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. A cover does sell a book, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Mike Giles has a follow-up question to that. He goes, to his ownership question. He goes, so there weren't any movie or toy rights for Men in Black or Cowboys and Aliens?
Well,
Cowboys and Aliens came later.
Yeah, because
that wasn't us. Tom and I had nothing to do with.
That was Platinum, wasn't it?
Men in Black was us.
Yeah.
Men in Black.
Yeah.
So, Chris, you want to go with the Men in Black question, or do you want me to do it?
You do it. This is right up your alley.
So, Men in Black was a creator-owned comic. It came in from Lowell Cunningham. That's right, Lowell Cunningham as an unsolicited pitch. He just sent it in the mail, and we read it, and we thought it's another one of those things where it's like, well, this book hits all those spots. It's got aliens. It's got this Men in Black stuff, which is kind of like X-Files. It hits all these little buttons, and there might be something here. And so we brought in Sandy Carruthers as the artist, and Lowell wrote everything full script, and Lowell signed the same kind of deal that everybody at that time signed, which was creator owned. So all movie rights, all media rights, all that other stuff stayed with Lowell because it was his thing. And so when the publishing contract was over and we stopped publishing Men in Black, all those rights went back to Lowell. So we didn't hold those rights. And then when those guys, the Laurie McDonald and the guy who made Sneakers, I forget his name, they came to the office, and we loaded them down with a stack of comic books because everybody who came to the office for a meeting left with a bag of comics. Yeah. And because we never knew what anybody was going to want. Right, and so they showed up, and they were interested in Men in Black. We put them in touch with Lowell, and then Scott got involved there and sort of made a side deal with Lowell to represent Men in Black to Hollywood. And then Walter Parks and Laurie McDonald then they were interested in it as independent producers. And then they became the head of Amblin Entertainment, which is Spielberg's company. And then
amazing.
Amblin Entertainment.
I didn't know that.
Amblin Entertainment then had a deal with Sony Columbia for distribution. So then that's how it was this thing of just things just fell into place. Yeah. It still took 4 years to make the movie, but things fell in place. And then because Parks and McDonald were Parks and McDonald, and because they had a deal with Amblin Entertainment, because that was Steven Spielberg, and because it was Columbia, then somebody slipped a copy of that to Will Smith, and then Will Smith said, "Oh, I could do this." And then Will Smith was like the hottest actor in Hollywood at the time. And Tommy Lee Jones signed.
Actually, I think he got super hot afterwards, but this was his vehicle after.
Right, but he was in a position. Right, and so.
I still remember hearing about it, and I said, "You mean the Fresh Prince?"
Right. Yeah. Well, that movie's gonna bomb.
Right.
And then they got a guy named Ed Solomon to write the screenplay, and he's a fantastic writer anyway. He did a great job. So just pieces fell into place, and at any point it could have fallen apart.
Yeah.
And it just didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything feels so precarious in this whole situation.
Yeah, if somebody had gotten cancer, or if somebody had gotten sick, or if somebody just said, "Nah, I don't like it," then it would just be,
dead in the water.
Just another one of the comic books.
It'd be a story like, "Oh, we were so close to making that movie."
Right.
And,
yeah.
I think precarious is a great word to describe the whole Malibu experience.
Yeah,
I think Tom, we must have had like 3 times that we had parking lot moments where it's like we're sitting in the parking lot going, "We're dead."
Yeah.
There's no way we figure, we Wile E. Coyote our way out of this one.
Right.
We're not going to get out of it.
Well, that leads to the next good question here. Mr. David A. Gutierrez says, "What were your surprise or breakthrough hits, and what did you think was going to be a success but wasn't?" And I would say this not just Ultraverse, but include the Ultraverse in this.
Yeah, I would say Ninja High School became a really great, regular hit, and working with Ben Dunn was an absolute pleasure, and one of my favorite people of all time to work with.
He's a great guy.
Great.
Yeah.
And then Robotech became a staple of the, Robotech 2 with Sentinels became a real staple.
And these were surprises to you?
Well, so to some of it, we had, we would have editorial meetings at a cafe in the morning at breakfast time, and argue about what we should put on the schedule or not put on the schedule, or what licenses we should go after or not. And there was some controversy over Robotech, whether we should, whether people would really like it, would it work as a black and white, but we were super bullish about it. I mean, Tom and I wrote all this.
We were the ones who were bullish about it.
Yeah,
because we thought it still had because one of the things that exists in the market is that Robotech as just an entity had a favorable feeling from retailers based on the Kamiko stuff.
Yeah.
So it had a track record and it had a
proven
thing. And so you just look at it, and it sold whatever it was, 40,000 or 50,000 copies in full color at Kamiko, and it's not going to do that now because the market is different, and we're not going to publish it in color. However, there's still some juice in there,
right?
And Alma and I were happy to sort of squeeze some of that out.
And the wall trips were great. They were great artists too. They really knocked it out of the park.
If we hadn't found those guys, that was everything.
Yeah.
Like I say, precarious.
Precarious.
Yeah. Willie Peppers says, "Hey guys, what is up, Mr. Willie Peppers? Glad to see you here." Now, so one of the things that I don't know where it kind of fits in all this, but it's the Full Moon. I can't remember which imprint did the Full Moon.
It was its own imprint.
Okay. So it was, but that fell under the Malibu umbrella as well.
That was another one where it was like what we could get co-funding for it, and we could try color, and we could try color at low risk. That was one of the key aspects. So everything that we did was a combination of art and commerce, right? It was like, do we want to do it? Does it make sense? And can we do it? And can we figure a way to do it so that we don't kill ourselves if it doesn't work? Because we had a lot of stuff that we tried that didn't work. Sorry, Tom. Go ahead and give some additional color on that.
Yeah, because I was the guy. I was the Full Moon guy. And so I worked with Charlie Band and Charlie Band's assistant. And Charlie Band was the movie director, writer who created all the stuff that was the Charles Band's. And he came up to the office and he said he wanted a comic book imprint. He loved comics as a kid. He wanted to make comic books. And he thought an easy way for him to make his movies get better financing was if they pre-existed as comic books. So the same argument that everybody always has, which is
So that's not a new. That's not an idea that's just been clicking around the last 10, 15 years.
No. We pioneered all of it, including multiple covers.
Yeah. So Charlie wanted to have all that, and so the deal that we cut with him was that he would pay for everything.
Yeah.
Like he would pay for the writer, he would pay for the artist, he would pay for the coloring, he'd pay for the printing.
That's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. And so it's like, did we really want to publish Doll Man comics or Demonic Toys comics? It's like, well, no, it's not, it's that thing where it's like, well, no, that's not in our heart. That's not why we wanted to become comic book makers. However, we were going to get to use really good paper.
Yep.
We were going to get to use full color printing. We were going to get to hire a bunch of people that we wanted to work with, and we were going to get to pay them basically market rates.
Dave Dorman covers upon a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Dave Dorman covers. We found these two guys in Australia, Glenn Lumsden and David DeVries, who were fantastic. Right. And they would, because they're in Australia, it's like 4 days difference in terms of.
Weren't those 4 days different? Isn't that the Southern Squadron guys?
Southern Squadron guys.
Yeah.
And so, and that was the thing too. If you worked for, this, Roland, if you worked for us and everything sort of went reasonably well, we'd come back to you with something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we'd done the Southern Squadron, we'd done some other stuff, and then we got the Full Moon deal, and we just said, here's the deal. And so everything, and the deal was with Charlie was, here's the deal. We'll do these things as long as you pay for everything. But once we start to run out of money and you don't pay us, we don't care. We're done. The imprint's out.
Dave, the Geek View Tavern says the Full Moon stuff all had Eternity logo on them, FYI.
Yes, but a Full Moon logo underneath that. So it's a sub imprint.
So Dave, we're both right.
So weird.
Yeah.
This is a good question from let me pop this from Rob up here. Rob says Scimitar had movie rights interest. I still have some of the mock-ups of the actress who wanted to do the movie somewhere in my stash.
That's cool.
That's interesting.
Scimitar, Ari Jones and Rob Davis.
Yeah. But also Stealth Force got by Aaron Spelling Productions.
Okay.
That's an alternate universe where that actually went through and became a show.
And we had a couple of other things too, but a lot of times in the early days, movie studios would call us all the time, and the first question in those days was always, well, how much is it selling? And then we would say, because we had all the facts and figures, we would just go, well, you're not going to believe this. It's, it's 4,000 copies. And they would go click.
Oh, that's just sad.
It just became a funny game with us. Hey, I got a movie producer on line 3 who wants to talk to him. Oh, I'll talk to him. I'll set his ass straight.
Yep. Mike Giles asked a good question here. He says, do you think it would be easier or harder to start up the same business idea in the new world of social media? So if Malibu were happening today and with all the social media, do you think it'd be easier or harder?
We talk about this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
All the time. Well, I wouldn't do the same idea. We'd do something different that would make sense for the current world that we're in. I think it would be easier to disseminate ideas. I think it would still be just as hard to get people to actually crack open their wallets or purses and pay for the comics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So awareness, I think you could have more awareness, and I think it would be possible now to bypass retailers to some degree, where we depended on retailers for everything, for all promotion. So that part would be easier, but I think it's just as hard or harder, I think, to get people to buy.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Tom? Am I off on that?
So it's the question of social media, the existence of social media is almost irrelevant, because what really matters is distribution.
Yeah.
So how do you get the book into the hands of people who could buy it? And social media does a really good job of sort of making people aware of stuff, but it doesn't necessarily drive them to the store.
Well, one of the problems that we see it, and you guys chime in if you see it differently, but one of the things that we kind of see with a lot of the Silverline stuff is that there's so much noise on social media. It's just that it's hard to rise above the noise, because there's always someone screaming louder than you are, and there's always someone, it's like the car wrecks. Everyone wants to watch the car wreck. So when that happens on social media, that's what everybody goes. You're like, but I don't have a car wreck. We just got a nice little economy car driving along here. Pay attention to us. And it's like they want to see the car wreck. So there's so much noise. I think that's kind of the way I see it.
There's another aspect to that, Roland, which I think that with everybody having phones, attention spans have shortened.
Oh my God.
For sure.
Like if you watch an old movie, and by old, I mean from the 90s or from the 80s,
right?
It feels like it's glacial how slow it is and how it's edited and so on. And and everyone's like, let's move this thing moving along. We just watched Home Alone, and there's like this credits crawl in the beginning, and I'm just like, holy crap, when is this movie ever gonna start? So I don't think it even matters like what age you are or what generation you're part of. The technology of everything that's happened in the last 30 and 40 years has diminished all of our abilities to pay attention for longer than about 2 seconds.
Right.
Yeah. I think if you were going to start something new, you'd want to figure out, like, you're not going to be like the comic book. If you're going to do a comic book company, the traditional diamond retail store infrastructure isn't going to help you.
Yeah,
it's a supplemental thing. And we had a guy on the Silverline podcast a month ago, Martin. And Martin said
Martin Piero, Cosmic Times.
He said that we're moving towards a world where everybody who's in the business is gathering up their tribe of their group. Then they're building their audience sort of one person at a time.
Yeah.
And it's you get 10 people from a comic book convention, you get 20 people from a live stream, you get 30 people from here, and you just, before you know it, you have 100 people, and then you hope to grow that to 150 people, and then 200 people, and you build slowly, tribally like that.
Yeah.
Right. That's where, if you're an independent creator, I think that's where it's going.
Yeah.
It's not enough to have readers. You have to have fans.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. as writers, we want the readers, but we want the fans. We don't want just someone who's going to buy it and go read it and then not tell anyone.
Right. Right.
We want
or
somebody
not buy
to
the
read
next
it.
one.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think
we want somebody to read it and yell about how great their experience was in reading it, so that their circle, their friends.
And given the current social media infrastructure that everybody currently has, like we had we had Darren and Ken and Nikki in the office back then filming everything that we did.
Right.
Yep.
So that was, the company was big enough that we had people running around the company filming everything.
Right.
And we would just nowadays we could just put that up on social media, on a couple times a day.
For
And
sure.
How awesome would that be?
Right.
That would have helped us a lot.
Man.
That would have helped, but also because we had the giant infrastructure already in place, and this was just a supplemental thing. I don't think it would help from the start, because you're not going to pay the salaries of 3 people to run around the office filming everything.
And no one's going to watch it for a company they have no idea who are these guys. I don't care about them.
Mhm.
And so because we had the big company, because we had all the employees, because we had all the books that we're selling, and because we had all the talent, you would just it's a big supplemental push.
Yeah.
One thing I like to say just quickly about Malibu is that what I miss most about Malibu is that we tried a lot of stuff. Like I'm tempted to say almost we tried everything. Yeah. And in some ways, like having our own film group in house, right? We were ahead of our time. We were already thinking in terms of, like, we look at the early Ultraverse commercials. We were already thinking about trying to do stuff that was wacky and YouTubey way before YouTube.
Right.
And everybody had a computer. Everybody was networked early on. We had email in like 85 or 86.
Yeah.
That for everybody in the company. So we were really thinking about stuff and willing to try stuff that we found out later. Most of the companies were not trying any of that stuff or doing any of that stuff.
Well, one of the things I remember going to New York after the Malibu the Marvel purchase is every editor at Malibu had a desk. I had a computer, not a desk. Had a computer. Even like assistant editors had the hand-me-down computers. Everyone had a computer.
And that had been going on for years, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, and and we mentioned once before, Tom was talking about when y'all updated your computers, you often just took the old ones out the door. I got one of your old ones. That was one of my first Macs, right? I went from my old Commodore 64 to a former.
To pass me down.
to a Malibu pass me. But Tom was like, send me these discs so that I don't have to read your dot matrix printer anymore. But one of the things I always said is that Malibu was one of the most technologically advanced, because when we went to Marvel, they had one computer.
It was on a push
they shared.
Day. Yeah.
It's one they shared. Like, what? How do you guys get anything done?
When they first bought us, and and Dave and I went to the Marvel offices in New York, and we're sitting there in this conference room with the other Marvel editors, and somebody said, "Well, we need some of this other stuff," and I said, "Well, get me a phone jack." And they're like, "What?" And so I reached into my backpack and I pulled out my laptop that I had, and I slapped it on the desk, and I said, "Here, plug me in, and I'll call up the office, I'll email my assistant, and she'll fax it over to us, and we'll have it in like 3 minutes." And they were looking like they had just seen ancient gods come out of the ground.
That's hilarious.
It's like the scene from 2001 when the monkeys see the monolith.
And to us, this was just everyday technology.
Every day, yeah.
And to them, it's like, well, how does that? I mean, how does that work? How do you get that thing? How do you get that thing to work? And how do you get that plugged in? And I said, I don't understand any of it. I got a guy at Malibu Comics named Glenn Bell.
Yeah, Glenn does everything.
He walks me through it, and I do the 3 steps that he tells me to. I don't have to.
This is how it works.
This is how it works. And just and if it breaks down, I just Glenn.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But we chose to build that muscle, right? To build that IT infrastructure early days.
Right, because the way we built it was the 3 of us all had computers, and so everybody who came aboard, well, they should have a computer too, because we're all going to have computers. And so every time we were going to hire somebody, it's like, well, how can we afford to hire them? And also, we have to get them a computer. Right. And then you just have to you just keep doing. You make that part of your business plan, and then it just becomes a thing that you do.
Yeah,
That was my job the first, I think, 3 or 4 years before.
Right,
because
you were the guy who insisted on all that stuff.
Well, also, Ohm was the first guy who gave me all the Mac computer games.
Right.
Here's Civilization. You need to play it.
That was the second thing. So once you came to the office, you got a computer, and then the second thing was Ohm would give you all the games.
Right.
Here's the things that will slow your productivity.
That's cool.
All right, we got a handful of comments here. Let's see. Give You Tavern says social media isn't a problem. 1,000 comic titles per month is a problem, and the audience is too small to support it. Are there still 1,000 comics a month being published? Is that the case?
Well, the Diamond catalog is still as fat as ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't have the most recent one, but I have, as you might imagine, I have January's, but I don't have. No, I'm sorry, I have December's, and it's still pretty big.
Yeah.
But this also doesn't include Marvel and DC in it.
Right. Yeah. So
yeah. So this is still a big thick catalog.
Yeah, because Image is like 30 titles a month, and DC is like 35 titles a month, and Marvel is like 35 or 40 titles a month, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
As we say in the mobile games industry, we have a big discoverability problem, right? It's hard to discover and figure out new titles unless the retailer is pointing you to that new title.
Yeah.
Well, they tend to do that, don't they? I mean, that's what they are good at. Good advice.
Yeah.
And I think
one would hope.
I think the comic book store is sort of a dead end business because you keep saying, how do we get kids to find out about comic books? Kids already know about comic books.
Right.
Kids know exactly where to get them. Kids know exactly what they're about. They've just sort of rejected them in the same way they reject Applebee's and Levi's. And it's just, it's and so it's the discoverability problem. How do we get kids interested in
right?
Because they will find comics. They'll buy manga.
Mm-hmm.
They'll look at Webtoon. They'll buy the Scholastic graphic novels. They're just done with superhero comics from the retail store.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mike Giles says imprint or product recognition seems easier to obtain, but the noise cancels out the attention span and longevity of the interest. He then says, I think CD-Romics by Malibu was way ahead of its time, probably too ahead.
Those things.
I've got a box of those right here.
CC's laughing at us. Good to see you, CC. Thanks for tuning in. Give Your Tavern says, Ed Hendricks taught me everything. And then he adds, plus Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and now there's a Fund My Comic. There are avenues that aren't part of the catalog.
Right.
Right.
So here's a question from Mr. Gutierrez. He says, how did Chris make the move to games?
Well, that's the other thing about Malibu is that we merged with an interactive company, right? So we had a whole subdivision called Malibu Interactive. We were all part of that decision to bring that in-house. And I'd always been a giant board game and games fan, as well as video game, understanding video games. So after I left Malibu, I took a job at a place called Oddworld. And I said, basically, okay, I was a VP at Marvel, but I want to go down and just become an associate game designer and understand how to actually build video games from the scratch. So I did the level design work, about a quarter of the level design work on Abe's Odyssey, and then was promoted to assistant director of the studio when we did Munch's Odyssey. So I learned a lot, just like everything, kind of same with comics. We just learned on the fly because there wasn't really like great schools to learn how to be a game designer, right? Or learn how to be a comic book editor. And you know that firsthand, Roland, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And most early game companies like that were run by a crazy person.
And also I wrote it from like our initial team that my first game was about 10 people, and then now teams are as big as 250, 300, even 400, using multiple studios to be able to deliver things like Call of Duty. Right? Yeah. They're just it's just gigantic, the amount of effort it takes to do these big games.
Do you think working at Malibu and managing so many people helped you make the transition into games?
Yeah, I think everything that we learned from Malibu about how to treat people, and we always treated people well. I felt like, and also we had kind of we had.
You might say
I would
that
say
about
that.
yourself. I wouldn't say that about myself.
And I think that, and Roland, you can chime in if you think I'm wrong on this. I think we always had sort of like the idea that we were all collaborating and that the best idea would win.
Yeah, I always felt, and I've said this, on our streams as well. I always felt that Malibu was an incredibly welcoming place. While you were always the boss, my boss. Tom was one of the boss. I always, there were the four founders. From my perspective, there was the four founders. You were the four bosses. But I always felt that you guys, all of you, were like, look, if you got something to say, come say it to me. And it wasn't. It was not quite a family, but I almost had that family feel. Didn't feel corporate. Not at the beginning anyway. It didn't feel corporate.
Not until we merged.
Because it always felt like I was heard. Right. I always felt like, okay, if I have an opinion, it might have been a dumb opinion, and it might not have been, opinion that an idea that was followed through. But I always felt like I was heard, and I felt that many in the company felt that way as well. Well, this is my thought.
We were open to other people's voices because that's how you get stuff done. That's where all the other ideas come from. Because Andy Cosby, John Riley, and Ross Ritchie would come up with the craziest stuff for the company to do. Yeah. And it's like nine times out of 10, you would just say, no, we don't have the infrastructure to do that. We don't have the money to do that. Or that's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But continue to bring me stuff, because the 10% of the stuff that worked, you would go, oh, I got to talk to Chris about this. Right. Or Dave needs to hear this, or Scott needs to hear about this, because there's a nugget here that we can nurture into something. And so that's the thing. You don't have to necessarily give everybody the green light, and like every idea is great, but you want people to come to you with something that they have, because you never know what's going to come up. Yeah.
The beauty of Malibu is that we were amateurs. We were all, I was fresh out of college, being a VP of a tiny little company, right? We didn't know what we were doing. We just made decisions that we thought made sense, and we try to treat people fairly and have a big tent for who we got into the company. And
I always felt that for the most, it's a job is a job, right? But I always felt, for the most part, everyone in the office was having a good time doing what they were doing.
I never liked you.
God, I hope so.
I like Roland.
Oh man, that's not good.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, we're going to be there. Some of us were there much longer than an 8-hour day. Yeah, and if you're going to be stuck there, it ought to be. It shouldn't be a slog. It's not. You're not. Right. It's not trench warfare. Right. You're making comic books.
It's fun, right? Yeah, making comic books. Yeah. It was great. Right. The smell of the storeroom. You know what else was great? Every day, new artwork was coming in, and new books were coming in. Yeah, every single day. I miss that so much.
That reminds me. I did want to ask you. Tell me more about how Rune came about, because I love having that comic. It was complicated, that one, right? Because
I want the real answer.
Yeah, because I know that there's a lot in there.
Well, Rune,
Chris, you go ahead.
Yeah, well, so Rune came about because we had our writers get together with all the writers there. It was one of my contributions early on that I wanted to come up with a villain that felt different than all the other villains, and I had this image of a vampire, but a special kind of vampire, like an energy vampire, attacking a T-Rex, just because I thought that was a cool image. But it was an idea. It was a one-off, right? And then when we were getting Barry Windsor Smith involved in the Ultraverse, he liked the description. He liked the idea of this, all the stuff going on in this world and with this particular character, and he had an idea for it. And we're like, hey, Barry Windsor Smith, if you notice the early Rune stuff, it doesn't say Christian Robert Ulm, right? Because nobody cares, except for my wife sometimes. what it says, Barry Windsor Smith, right?
Hyphen. Don't forget the hyphen.
Yeah, the hyphen.
I did once.
And rightfully so. Barry brought the character to life, and Barry's a genius, right? If you've read Monster,
he's amazing.
He's amazing, and also he was wonderful to work with because he just killed me on like laying out the captions and the text bubbles on copies of the art. He was very, very particular about how to do it, and we talk about it, and I learned a crap load from just working on that project with Barry. Awesome. And I really enjoyed him too. He's a wonderful person. And now we'll hear Tom's version of it.
Well, before Tom goes and stamps on it, I want to say
I see you know Tom well.
I love having the art come in. The day that art would come in, we'd just be like ogling.
Yeah,
it's just stunning to see this big board of paint and beautiful, beautiful work.
So my memory is slightly different from Chris's in the sense of the Rune origin, is because Alm had actually developed Rune fairly deeply. There's actually an existing first issue script. It was centered around 4 kids, and Rune was the character who was going to basically disrupt the 4 kids. So it was more like Stranger Things with Rune,
or It
with Rune. And so because Alm had a big it may still do a big interest in horror and gothic sort of characters.
Stephen King-ish type stuff. I wanted to bring that to superhero comics. That's
so awesome.
A Stranger Things kind of approach.
And so then when Barry Windsor Smith came along, that sort of all went out the door because Bob Jacob really wanted to bring in Barry Windsor Smith. As you know, I've said this before. Bob had this theory that what Malibu needed was the 6th man. So if you follow basketball, for example, you have 5 players on the field, but the 6th man is the guy who comes in off the bench about mid-game and shakes up everything. And so that was Barry, the 6th man with 3 names.
Yeah. I have a couple. There are a couple other questions here, but I've got a couple that I want to toss out first. So 2, they're opposite questions, Chris. So what? Looking back, and I know there's a lot of things to call on. What would you say might be your biggest regret? And I don't mean like, but looking back at Malibu, it's like I wish we had done X, that kind of thing. What do you? I know there's a lot of them probably, but
we talked about 2 weeks ago.
What kind of looking back on it, Is there one thing that you kind of I wish this had happened, or I wish we had done this differently, or?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be just one. If you've got a couple, that's fine. But
no, I think there's a lot. So I'm going to step back and answer the question in 2 parts. The first part is that when I think of the company, I wish that I had known more. Like I wish I had known what I know now.
Right.
Could bring that to the company earlier. Second thing was, I wish we had more time to focus on strategy. We were so busy being tactical all the time, just because we had to get the books out the door. And we had to keep, also, we were a company that was bootstrapped, and we never took, there was no like $5 million investment that we were living off of or anything like that. We literally couldn't publish the books coming up unless we got paid for the books that had come out.
Wow.
So we were
hand to mouth.
Exactly. Well, precarious is the word I used earlier, and I think that fits, right?
It does.
So I think that what that did, like particularly, I'm going to speak for Tom here because I like to do that. Particularly for Tom and I, because we were controlling mostly what was going on and off the schedule. Right. We had this very every month it was like, are we going to hit our nut? Are we going to make our mortgage essentially for this month? Do we have to come up with some surprise thing at the last minute, like repackaging old newspaper strips into a comic so that we could make? So we were doing that. We were in that mode constantly, so we never got a chance to really think about
the future.
Hey, what the future could be, until we got an additional investment that came a little bit later, and we were able to do the Ultraverse, and also things were breaking differently because of Image and our association with Image, right? But all the way up to that point, we were and unfortunately, we kind of got in that mindset where it's really hard to break out of that mindset. So if I had one regret, it would be that we actually had like a couple months that we could have just been like, hey, let's pivot and focus on editorially on this or on that.
Yeah. Cool. And what about then from on the other end of it? Then what if you look back and say, hey, this is one of the things that I'm most happy about, I'm most proud of, COVID related?
Number one for me is the great people that we got a chance to work with, who have gone on to do amazing things in Hollywood and games and in comics. Continuing to do great comics. You being one of them. All of you, Roberta.
Oh, thank you.
Tom.
Oh, sure.
He's in there.
but seriously,
yeah.
The fact that interns and people that just started at the company have gone on to have their own careers, because that lasts forever, right? Those things last forever in my head. And then I think we punched way above our weight.
Yeah.
And we were able to do that through guile and planning and figuring stuff out. I've never worked with a more complimentary person probably to my way of working than Tom, and Dave as well, right? So I think we were able to keep our values, and I wish I had appreciated it more now that I've been around the block a lot more and seen how other things actually work. But we were lucky. Who has the ability to green light 30 different projects a month with no interference?
Right.
In their 20s.
In the world.
Yeah.
In their 20s.
Nobody, I mean, that's one of the most impressive parts. When I got the job, I was like, oh my God, how young everybody that's the founder. That's insane that we're all having that good a time and it's all working. It's amazing.
Yeah. I remember the first time I saw Scott, I'm like, how old is he?
we were all kids.
Also, you were just as likely to find people talking seriously about business as you were to find those same people throwing a frisbee across the office.
That's for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Or building hamster trails, right?
Right.
I forget who had those. Somebody had those.
I don't remember hamster trails.
They have a trail.
In their office?
Yeah.
I forgot who had that, but somebody. Yeah.
Somebody. I can't remember who it was now.
Ask Mike. He'll remember.
Yes.
Yeah. About Mike, he'll probably chime in here. David A. Gutierrez says, let me put it up here. What was Chris Ulm's favorite title he wrote? He worked on or wrote?
Oh, that's
I know the answer to that. That was Dead Clown.
that was more. That should never have been on our schedule. I just it was fun. I had a lot of fun with almost everything. I was so busy worrying about the overall company though that I wasn't able to really enjoy as much as I'd like to have done some of the individual titles. I really liked Rune. It was hard to collaborate with a superstar, right? Just because, but I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed working on as an editor on the Ultraverse titles. I really enjoyed working with the editorial team. Roland, you and Hank and Dan and others. So yeah.
So there actually that's a question that kind of popped up here. We've been a little over an hour, so unless you guys can think of something, we may make this the last question here. So coming from the editorial standpoint, so you made the shift from doing Airsail Adventure Eternity, where they were primarily creator driven, creator run, to really kind of shepherding the stories with the Ultraverse. What kind of change for you did you see, and how did that kind of affect the way you worked with creators?
That's a good one. I think that there was a little bit of a whiplash with the previous Malibu creators in terms of being on Ultraverse books. The strategy changed because we had gotten more investment, and the idea was we can't be hand to mouth all the time with just worrying about publishing. We actually have to build ongoing value for the company itself, right? And that means that we have to own and control those rights. But what we can do is we can share them, and that's what we did. So that way we control them. But at the same time, if anything happens, the original creators would benefit. And so we tried to kind of mix the old business model with the new. And I felt that was a little bit different working with the creators. I think there was a higher expectation of the quality of the scripts, and it was a little bit more. It was also less free, like because we were doing creator owned and you were getting an advance against royalties. It was sort of like, do what you want to do. But now it became suddenly, it's a company owned book. We really want to, we really have to have more of a say in where this particular thing goes. And we're investing a lot in both marketing, covers, and internal color pages. So the risks got higher than the earlier stuff. So it wasn't a bad transition. I mean, I really enjoyed it, but I do think there was more risk of hurting people's feelings and then dealing with emotions as a result of their characters. Especially when it came to new teams doing things. Right. And changing out the teams. It was expected at Marvel that you do that with Thor, but at Malibu that wasn't an expected thing.
And that was tough. It was
that was tough.
I remember it was tough. Cassisi, I see your question. I'm gonna let you have it, unless you guys, Roberta, Mike, Tom, you have another question. I'll let Cassisi have the last one unless you do. All right. This is a good one here from Cassisi. He says, "What do you see as the future of storytelling in terms of comics?"
That's a great question. I think that two types of people buy comics. Readers buy comics because they just enjoy the possibilities that comics can present, the crazy fantasy, the super heroics, the science fiction aspects without a budget, right? It doesn't have to have any kind of a budget, and the concepts can be grandiose. And then you have collectors who actually want to have something valuable. They like that idea that it's something that's on their shelf, and they may be both, right? They could be somebody who loves that thing and a collector. I think the future of printed comics has got to be that something that you actually own as opposed to a digital thing is worth collecting and pursuing. So I can see comics in the future being still printed and still about making some kind of a legacy collectible. But I don't think the current comics are in that zone yet. So I can see that morphing to that. In terms of storytelling, comics are already a great venue for telling any kind of story you want. And I think that with AI coming in and other things, that it'll probably democratize it more, which means there's going to be a lot more crappy comics out there. That's what I'm going to say, because just like, do you remember when there were no Macs and nobody knew how to make flyers, and then suddenly everyone's got a Mac and they're making a flyer with 17 fonts and all that stuff. That's what, if everyone can be a comic book artist by using AI, that's kind of the direction we're going to go.
It's like Homer Simpson's landing page.
Yeah. And then the other technological thing I think that's going to happen is that localized printing and printing smaller runs is going to become more and more common, and the machines will become cheaper and cheaper. So I think there's going to be a lot of micro print runs that will be possible, which might also be great, right? There may be an opportunity there.
Well, we use Kablam, and Kablam is a short run specialty printer, and of course, the guys who own it, Barry Gregory and Thomas Formani are the co-owners, and of course, I tell them all the time, it's both their fault and it's the pro and the con. The good part is that it's easier now for comic creators like us to make short run comics, but also it's easier for just anybody to do it now.
We call that democratizing.
It's like the internet. Everybody can get on who has an opinion.
Right. Yep.
Well, way back in those days when Photoshop wasn't a thing, everyone who had Photoshop was like, oh, I know what to do. I can make a flyer, and it's like,
Right.
if you didn't study any design or have any art skill, yeah, it's physically made.
Right.
And it's
You can
terrible.
paint it. It's done.
It's just not any good.
It's
That's
just
right.
not any good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any design sense.
This has been
Yeah,
a blast.
the tools always come out first, I think.
So
and
I think
then-
Mike Giles has one last question.
Mike Giles has one last. I think. Mike Giles says, "Do you wish the Marvel sale didn't happen, and would we have kept on if it? I'm assuming if it didn't happen."
At the time, and Tom can go into excruciating detail about this. We were one of the only companies that was looked on at the same time by both DC Warner and Marvel, and we had to make a deal with one of them because we had gotten too big to not make that deal. The only other option would have been to slim down to a tiny skeleton crew and sort of pivot and restart. And I don't think we had the heart to do that at the time. Maybe if I go back, I'd say maybe that would have been it certainly would have been different had we gone with DC. It would have been different had we slimmed down. But those were really the choices that I think that we had.
Well, it would have meant getting rid of a lot of folks.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Almost everybody. I mean, it literally, when I say skeleton crew, they'll probably be back to Malibu 1987 or 88.
It would basically be me, Chris, and Dave again.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And the coloring department, if it still existed, would
be
most
Who has
likely
told
be
us.
would be outsourced or contract. Like basically we're gonna slim you down. Here's a computer. Go to your home and come in and pick up work from Tom or Chris and Dave, and that's what it would be. So it wouldn't be. I don't think there's a utopian solution,
right,
that would have worked other than DC. DC was the better choice.
Yeah,
for long term.
For long term, and I think, Chris and I would have been gone, but the other people might have stayed on much longer.
Maybe not. I think the difference between Marvel and DC was that DC had a pretty big custom comics division. That could have been a natural place for Malibu to have fit in, being a West Coast company.
Yeah.
And they may have had, I think they would have had a lot more patience. So there would have been more time to come up with pivots and alternate ideas on how to make Malibu, really profitable for
make
DC.
it work.
Yeah, something
make it
would have
work.
changed.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
And I think DC would have valued the coloring department where Marvel did not.
Yeah.
And editorial too. I think we had dinners where it was very clear that they valued us.
Well, it's
for a variety of reasons.
It's the difference between Paul as a comic book guy.
Yeah.
Paul understood how comic books were made. Paul understood the history of comics. Paul understood what was needed to make comics, and he understood. He was also a numbers guy, so he understood how, in-house coloring is a cost-saving part of the dynamic.
Right.
And Marvel, Terry Stewart was not a comic book guy. He liked comic book stuff, but he was not a comic book guy.
He was an Auburn football guy.
Right. That's right. He's a jukebox guy. He's a memorabilia guy.
But they were mostly concerned about stock price.
Yeah.
That was the most important thing driving most of their decisions, where DC would have been mostly concerned about getting us at a good enough cost that they could have been profitable, and that it would help them to make DC more profitable.
Right. Yeah. And then we would have been because in the alternative universe, then DC might never have moved to Burbank. DC might have moved out to the Malibu offices.
Right. Calabasas or something.
Calabasas.
Yeah.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
Because we had the space.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was a cool building.
Yeah.
Well, can we ask you to come back on again sometime in the future and talk more comics? And
I'm ready.
All right,
I'm ready, willing, and able.
Good.
Let's do it.
So we want to talk about. I already told Tom we need to talk about editing sometime, editing comics and kind of how they've changed over the years and
love
that
to.
kind of stuff. Yeah, cool. Well, one last thing, Chris. At the end of our shows, we like to say, "Make mine Silverline." What I would like to do, if you're willing, is I'm going to go big screen on you, and you just say, "I'm Chris Ohm. Make mine Silverline," and then we're gonna get out of here. You okay to do that?
I'm ready.
All right, here. Let me find you here. All right, Chris, go.
Hi, I'm Chris Olm. I'm the former editor-in-chief of Malibu Comics. Make mine Silverline.
Hi, my name is Paul Kupperberg. Make mine Silverline.